You're listening to the Colts Blue Zone Podcast with Mike Chappell and Dave Griffiths.
Inside the Fox 59 CBS 4 podcast studio, welcome to another Colts Blue Zone podcast alongside Mike Chappell and Joe Hopkins. I'm Dave Griffiths. Appreciate all you Colts fans tuning in. It is draft month. It is April. Yes, sir. And the Colts also will get started in the very near future working out at team headquarters because they have a new head coach. They're allowed to work out Monday, a little bit earlier than everyone else. Next week, Shane Steichen and the crew in-house at West 56th Street. So plenty going on in Horseshoe World. And we'll begin, of course, with a no update about Lamar Jackson. The same old right now. Nothing new, nothing moving forward, at least publicly, Chap, what's going on with this quarterback. That means that he has his views and other teams have their views, and there have not been any major breakthroughs with any team right now across the NFL as to acquiring a former NFL MVP.
And if you're, let's just say the Colts, since we're in Indy, you want to do this, if you're going to do it, you do it after the draft.
100%.
You're not going to give the fourth pick overall.
Nope.
So, maybe that has something to do with it. And again, from the owners' meetings, it's very clear that there's an interest. But from the vibes that I got is that the price is too steep. I think they're okay to some level on the draft picks. The $200 and some million guaranteed, to me, is almost a non-starter.
That's what it seemed like Irsay said. We discussed this in depth the other week, so we don't need to go into it too much further right now. So I'll just pivot us somewhere else, talking about quarterbacks still, saying the Colts and the quarterbacks that are in this draft, and the Colts plan to work out all these top four individually, per a couple of reports that have emerged over the past week.
They did work out the two guys yesterday.
Okay.
On the West Coast, I was able to confirm
Stroud.
that. Stroud and Young, because they work out together in somewhere out in California. I saw the city, and it's Huntington Beach, I think it was. So you got a chance to do that. You work out two guys you probably have zero chance of getting. You do your work because can you imagine not doing your work on those guys, and then Frank Reich takes Anthony Richardson? Mm-hmm. So you have to do your work.
Right. If you've ever watched the movie Draft Day, you know somebody could fall. You never know. And you got to keep Vontae Mack no matter what.
Due diligence.
That's right. Do your due diligence. You never know what's going to happen there. Also, C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, Will Levis. And if you could work out Hendon Hooker, you probably would do that too. That's another name that's just been interesting. We were talking about it. It's funny. We were talking about quarterbacks here before we popped on the microphones and turned on the show. And Joe's like, "Hey, easy fellas. We should start the podcast here before we start talking about quarterbacks." And right you are, but it's funny, Joe, because it's something that's very pervasive in our thinking right now. Like, we come together and immediately that's the first thing that comes to our mind, because that's the first thing that's come to our mind really for the past year or two for looking for a long-term quarterback, and just more so under the microscope, obviously, this offseason.
Yeah, and it seems to be something different with every new report that comes out. This team likes this. Oh, there's, what was it this week, that the Titans could trade up to number 3, but, of course they could. I'm not sure if they will. So there's a lot going on right now with the quarterbacks. When we were talking about, what if Chris Ballard doesn't like any of the quarterbacks that are left at 4?
At 4.
At 4.
If he doesn't like them with the value at 4.
And then in the pressure that, having a quarterback still be available that publicly at least is deemed worthy of a top 4 pick, whether it's Levis or Richardson.
And the public always knows what it's doing.
Exactly. As opposed to last year, if they had the 4th pick and they could have just passed because it was a weaker quarterback class. I don't think anyone thought, obviously Kenny Pickett, not a top talent.
Where do you go, 20?
I think around there.
Pittsburgh?
Late teens or early 20s to Pittsburgh. So the pressure is definitely on the Colts to take a quarterback, but Ballard's been very emphatic in the past that he's not going to take one just to take one. But at the same time, you can't get cold feet either. And until you find the guy, you got to keep taking swings on players that you think have potential.
And then if you don't take him and somebody else takes him, if Seattle takes him at 5, and then God forbid Geno Smith gets hurt and he steps in and that quarterback leads them to the playoffs, then it's just burned down everything, Colts fans here in Indianapolis. And you excuse me, it's just so intriguing how this month is going to play out, how this year is going to play out. And obviously the draft is the first one that's right in front of us.
The only thing that matters is how they view and evaluate these quarterbacks. And like Joe said, he's not going to take a guy that they don't have a conviction on. They just won't. It's almost worse to not. It's almost worse to take the wrong guy than to not take one. Ask the Jets twice. The New England Patriots with their guy. You just don't know it. And I would argue with Arizona with Kyler Murray. But it's one thing we were talking about, and again, we could do podcast after podcast on this. We were talking before we went on the air about if everyone's right now and they've decided on Anthony Richardson, that's what seems to be the consensus. He's looked at as a project. I know he bristled at that at the combine, but he's got 13 starts. If you're going to do that, you may be really looking to 2024 to where he might really make an impact. Well, if that's the case, then give serious consideration to Hendon Hooker, because he will be ready to go at some point this year, but he'll really be ready to go in 2024. And then you can use the fourth pick on a left tackle, a pass rusher. Of course, then you've got to trade back into the bottom of the first round or the middle of the first round to get Hooker. But it's going to be fascinating because they have got to find a quarterback of the future. It's not Gardner Minshew. It's not.
Come on, chap.
He might be, here I'm splashing water on everything, but he might be one of the better bridges, the more interesting bridges they've had. But they've got to get a guy that they can build around and they can to inject some optimism in the fan base.
Whichever quarterback you take, you have to have a good offensive line in front of him. We're going to talk extensively about offensive line in this episode. We'll get to that in a bit with top prospects in the draft, maybe day 2, day 3 as well, just because of what's happened the past couple of years with the offensive line last year in particular. But what did want to touch on one report from ESPN's Jeremy Fowler first, that there is a buzz league-wide, quote-unquote, about the Colts selecting Will Levis 4th overall.
See, that's the good and the bad part of the month.
Yeah.
Is everybody's got a buzz. And
buzz. Biz buzz.
I've always said whenever someone says, well, I've heard from the Colts that the Colts don't leak. They just don't. So you're trying to read into, well, they had an area scout with Bryce Young and Stroud, and then they put Morocco Brown was it Richardson's?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And Morocco Brown is he's their
guy.
He's their guy. He really is. Read into it if you want, but the Colts don't leak what they're doing. They simply don't.
Right, and that's a note that Joe you had on this was that that is something that is different. Like, and you look for that this time of year. You look for little differences, and understandably so. And it is at least a notable difference that the Colts would send their chief personnel executive Morocco Brown to Trent Richardson, for the love, to Anthony Richardson's pro day.
I think he's available. Isn't he available?
I'll bet he is. You could. He might even be in the XFL or
he
the.
may be 250 right now.
Last I saw, he's playing in the Mexican football league.
Can he play offensive line? Maybe he could right now.
But yeah, I mean, you guys know how much I love Anthony Richardson. I was gawking at his pro day
for months. Joe has been ready to draft Anthony Richardson.
Yeah. So and you know how not high I am on Will Levis.
Exactly.
So I'm really trying to mentally prepare myself for it to be Will Levis. I actually had a dream the other night that both Richardson and Levis were on the board, and the Colts picked Levis, and I was just grinding my teeth. But yeah, this screams smokescreen to me with the Jeremy Fowler report about the buzz league-wide, because if the Colts do like Richardson, they would want people to think that they were going to take Levis so that someone doesn't jump them at 3.
If the Colts really like Richardson, they move to 3, period.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't, I'm convinced Arizona will not pick 3rd. So if you say this is the guy that we think can do it, you give up a 2nd, you give up a 3rd, whatever it takes, and you move up a spot and you get your guy.
Well, and I saw a report today that I think it was Todd McShay says that since he gets talking about the Raiders, who are one of the teams that are rumored to potentially move up to 3 and get a quarterback, to learn for a little bit and eventually take over for Jimmy G. But he said that the sense he gets from talking with people in their organizations that if it's not Young or Stroud, they're not really interested in the other two quarterbacks. That also kind of screams smokescreen to me. Like, no one wants to be like, yeah, we want to trade up to 3, right? Because then you're just driving up the asking price. So everyone wants to put it out there that we don't want to trade up. We don't want to trade up. And because the more teams that, the more known it is that there are multiple teams trying to trade up to 3, the more that just increases the price of that 3rd overall pick.
I think with the wide range of views on both Richardson and Levis in particular, that we will see some time, and probably even till draft day, until something happens on that 3rd overall pick, because you anticipate what's going to happen 1-2, but after that, there's going to be a lot of teams who like one, don't like the other, who don't like one and like the other, and you got to make sure you know what's going to happen 1-2 first. You got to really make that settled.
Well, I don't think it will be traded until draft day, because if you're the Cardinals, say the Texans or the Panthers do take Richardson, then all of a sudden Young or Stroud's available, that might make the price go up. That might make the price go up. So
but if I'm a team, I want the trade done before then.
Right, of course.
So the price doesn't go up.
Yep.
Exactly. So I think the Cardinals are going to wait till draft day and then just see what they can get.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And again, what we're talking to is, let's say the Colts don't like these two guys and they like Hooker, and so you're taking at 3, at 4, you would get the best player in the draft. If you stand pat, you will get the best player in the draft.
Will
the
Anderson or whoever
trade.
that might be, yes.
Right. If quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3, but if your objective is to get Hooker, then you better be darn sure you can trade up high enough in round 1 to get him.
Right.
Can you imagine sitting there and your plans are to get your left tackle or a pass rusher, and you're going to we'll get Hooker, and then you don't, and then you're sitting there with a good pass rusher and a really good left tackle and Gardner Minshew.
All on board the Gardner Minshew train. Yeah.
And then just going in next year and try and figure it out again. But I know it's a great quarterback draft next year, but there's no guarantee at all that you're going to be in a position to take one of those.
That you'll be that bad.
Be that bad or be able to trade for it. Like maybe the team that has the first 2 picks needs quarterbacks as well, and that those picks aren't available. So quite a risk just to bank on next year. I think the Colts really need to get a quarterback in the first round this year, wherever it might be in the first round.
Couple personnel notes as we kind of wrap up this news segment. The Colts have signed some depth on the offensive side of the ball. Tight end Pharaoh Brown, 28-year-old, who's played for Cleveland, Houston, and Oakland/Vegas during his career. 55 games, 36 starts. He's another big tight end. He'll fit in that group perfectly of 6'6" and above gentlemen.
But he can block.
He can block. Well, if you don't have an offensive line, just get you a tight end that can block. So have him and Mo in there and have Max protect and have 7 guys. Maybe you can block 4 opposing players with 7, because you couldn't block them with 5 last year.
I think it makes Mo a little more expendable. There's been rumors that the Colts could try and trade him or cut him for salary cap purposes. I kind of think that's less likely now that they decided to keep Kenny Moore.
Right.
Because they would save even more money by cutting Kenny Moore. But just adding depth to that tight end room that has a lot of youth is definitely a good move. And then adding to the running back room as well.
Yeah, I mean, you got Mo, you got Brown, you got Ogletree, and then Woods. Those 4 are kind of and Kylan Granson. I forgot about Kylan.
him.
Jeez, that's 5. You're
That's
not going to carry
you're not
5 tight
gonna carry
ends.
5. No.
That's the thing. So yeah, Pharaoh Brown is either to replace Mo or is just a body now, because I don't think he's going to beat any of those guys out for.
But
for
again, he does things that the other ones don't do.
You're right. You're not wrong. You are right. So maybe it's Mo and him, and then 2 other guys. It's either Granson.
I don't say Mo can't block, but he's not consistent at it.
Right.
That's what we talked all last year about the loss of Jack Doyle.
Yep.
It wasn't necessarily it was the 3rd and 7th he converted, but boy, was the run blocking. And it's funny, I'd forgotten they've got 5, I guess, veteran tight ends.
Right.
You won't carry 5 tight ends.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. You can't really call Ogletree a veteran, I don't think.
No, but
yeah, I know.
You're
But
right. You're right.
He was on the way last year to very easily earning a roster spot in training camp. So he's a guy that you expect, coming back from injury this year, to be back on that same track.
And we don't know how Steichen feels about these guys, right? It's a completely new set of eyes evaluating these players.
Which is a good thing.
Maybe, maybe he doesn't want a 6'1" tight end in Kylan Granson. So we'll just have to see what his flavor is and the kind of things he's looking for with the roster spots.
Colts have also signed running back Darrington Evans, 24-year-old, a former third-round pick, was taken by the Titans in the 2020 draft. Some injuries kind of derailed his career. He played for Tennessee. He played for Chicago. Has not been all that impressive in any fashion. Has scored 1 touchdown and has like 30 carries, 5 catches in 12 total games. So a guy to stash and see, really. Not like I said, not much of a
body. Yeah.
Exactly.
He was brought into Tennessee to try and be like, I guess, the pass catching third down back to spell Derrick Henry, but it just never worked out because he kept getting hurt.
Yep. And Henry's gotten better at catching the ball, so it hasn't been that big of a hole in their offense.
Probably just leave him on the field as much as possible is the best idea.
That has been the path to success for them, even though they were rumored to be wanting to trade him, and now nothing has materialized with that. So he's going to be probably approaching off-season workouts in April, like, oh, hey, guys, yeah, here I am. So we'll see what happens there. What does Hancock Health's membership in the Mayo Clinic Care Network mean for you? It means our independent health network now has access to the knowledge and resources of the world leader in medicine. It means your Hancock Health doctor can now consult with Mayo Clinic specialists to confirm a diagnosis or treatment plan. And it means that together we're making health possible for you. Learn more about our new clinical collaboration at hancockregional.org/Mayo Clinic. Need new windows? Contact your hometown team today. Hometown Window and Doors are Central Indiana's premier, locally owned, full-service Anderson window dealer with master installers. From design to installation, the Hometown team handles it all. They carry unlimited options with competitive pricing. Call them direct to get 25% off your windows if you call within the next 60 days. Hometown Window and Doors gives you all the perks of a national brand with a hometown feel. Visit them at hometownwindowteam.com today. So that brings us to offensive linemen. And, Mike, you had an article that's online right now, fox59.com, CBS4Indy.com, all about offensive line as you go through different positions for the Colts as the draft approaches, where they need help, where they don't need help. And even though there has been a lot of investment in the offensive line over the past couple years by Chris Ballard, by this front office, it is undeniable that this offensive line needs not just an ounce of help, but quite a bit of help as the
It's
as
incredible
the
how it
approaches.
has regressed over the last, 2.5 years? And I think what's most distressing, it's not that Danny Pinner flamed out at right guard or Bernard Ryman wasn't really ready, when he was put in there at Denver. It's that the other 3 guys, again, took a major step backward. And a couple of, I think Quentin and Braden got their act together as the season went on. Ryan Kelly struggled. So when you've got so much money, they're 3 of your top 5 salary cap hits. Smith, Kelly, and Quentin are, and Quentin goes through the roof next year. It's like $25 million. So they're banking on, obviously, that these guys will get their act together. And like Joe mentioned, on a fresh set of eyes, that with the new offensive line coach, something will change. Something's got to change. So that's what that was there were so many things that went wrong last year. But if you had to say one thing, it was the offensive line.
I've talked about this until I'm blue in the face with kind of taking just another example and comparing it to this with what the Colts did with quarterbacks leading into 2021 with Carson Wentz. They They traded for a guy who had an injury history and then didn't do anything to back him up. And you saw it in the 3rd week of the season when he trotted out there.
The thing they did was they put left tackle with Eric Fisher, who was injured.
Right, with no ankles. And they set the team up, the front office set the team up for failure. And they did it again last year on the offensive
Same
line.
thing.
They set the team up for failure because they did not have a backup plan, Joe. They had Danny Pinter out there, and we thought that he had potential because of what he did at center last year. They put, the year before, they put Matt Pryor out there at left tackle because they thought that he had potential out there. And we talked well about him on this podcast because we thought that he had potential out there. But with no viable backup plan, if that potential is not achieved, which it wasn't, disaster happened. It was obvious when it happened what was going down.
From the start, it was obvious.
From the very jump. And so that's what happened. We have to start with where we are with the offensive line before the Colts can fix it, right?
Yeah, and I just hate Ballard's reasoning for that is we thought Quentin, Kelly, and Braden were going to be so good that those other two spots didn't matter as much. And that I just don't understand that thinking whatsoever, especially at left tackle. I could see maybe, if it's a couple guard spots, it's like, well, we're strong at tackle and center, and we think they'll help make up at guard.
We can make do at guard,
yeah.
at right guard.
But saying you feel so good with your guards and centers that your left tackle is not going to matter as much just is baffling to me. And as we sit here today, the team has still done nothing to improve the offensive line. The only change
They
is that
re-signed Carter O'Donnell.
O'Donnell.
Yeah.
I don't think he's ever played a snap.
Nope.
Pryor's now in San Francisco. So, he gets a new start there in San Fran to be some depth for them. But that's the only change along the offensive line. I'm kind of shocked that they haven't brought in, a swing tackle, someone to compete for right guard, anything.
Now, didn't they get? I think what the right guard probably isn't here yet. Didn't they get the other two guys late? Chris Reed, I think he was
a later addition. I think
he was about April. What was in Glowinski the waiver?
Yeah, I think they grabbed him off of waivers in like January or something like that.
Yeah. So, but I think that I think they believe they can get I guess serviceable is the word, which I know that should never be the standard.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the one thing I looked up is their 6 backups have. I wish I had the numbers in front of me. The only guy with any experience is Danny Pinter.
Mm-hmm.
And 3 of the guys have never played.
Mm-hmm.
So it's okay. Let's say they stay at 4 and they've got that pick in the second round. I guess you take an offensive lineman. I would probably take a corner in the top of the second round. I don't know. But to expect a second, third, or fourth round draft pick to step in and play meaningful right away, Ryman wasn't ready last year.
That's exactly the point I was about to make, Chap. You read my mind. They took Bernard Ryman in the 3rd round, and at the jump, he wasn't good to go. He just wasn't.
And everyone knew that. That's not a knock on him.
No, not even close. And he got better as the season went on. He was far more serviceable at the end of the year than he was when he took over in Denver or whenever it was, or his first start was Denver.
End of the year, he's playing starter quality football.
Right. I think he showed us enough that you're not so nervous
right
going into this season at left tackle as we have been the last 2 years. So okay, but you've still got a right guard problem and you've got major depth problems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you want to bring someone in to push them. You can't just. We saw this problem last year in training camp. There was no competition for Pryor. There was not really any competition for Pinter, and then they just kind of fell on their faces when the season started. So I think they are being patient. I mean, more patient than us. I want to see them sign somebody so I can go, okay, they're doing things to address the offensive line, but there are still some swing tackles out there. I think Fleming. Who played for the Broncos last year. We kind of went over him a couple podcasts ago, but he'd be a decent choice. And I do think you got to strongly consider offensive line with your second-round pick and corner as well. I think it just kind of depends on who falls to you. Maybe there's a corner you thought would be a first-round pick. You're surprised he's there, and you just can't pass him up.
If you think a guy's going to be a significant player this year, I would opt for the offensive lineman.
Just to help the quarterback.
And then really hit corner in round 3. Just because of the importance, I guess, with the young quarterback.
And just hope you don't draft DeJon Smith in round 3. Right, Chap?
Quincy Wilson.
Wilson, round two.
There's some guys that you think, really?
Like, yikes. Oh, no.
TJ Green.
Yeah, well, that one just goes without saying, even though we will say it from time to time.
I believe those were the Grigson days.
Those were all Grigson picks.
Still.
Yeah.
DeJohn Smith was Chuck's guy, wasn't it?
Yes, he was. He was Chuck's guy.
He's going to be the greatest corner of all time.
Well, I don't know who he compared him to, like he compared Malik Hooker to Ed Reed, but who knows?
Quincy was Ballard.
Was Quincy Ballard? Yes, he was.
So.
You're right.
His first
You're
draft.
right. I was wrong. Yes, good point. Oh, boy. Anyway, let's get back to the offensive line. We're getting into the weeds with other things that we do not need to get into right now. 60 sacks allowed last year was the second most in franchise history. They also allowed 68 quarterback hits, which Matt Ryan was a scarecrow back in the pocket. And you use different words, whether it's statue or whatever. I use scarecrow because he looked scared.
And he had the second longest run of the season by the team, I believe it was a 33,
How about
39 yards.
Mr. Mobile, Matt Ryan, off and
Out there
running.
against the Raiders. Yeah. And then, for Scarecrow Matt Ryan, Nick Foles, probably even worse
Right.
mobility-wise.
Yeah, that's
Well,
quite
Ellinger
possible.
got sacked 9 times in New England.
Look, man, that I was there. That was there were times last year where it was embarrassing. Like, if you were a Colts offensive lineman, you should have been embarrassed watching the tape, and that was one of them because Matthew Judon just made them look stupid, silly, ridiculous. Just a little stunt multiple times, same stunt multiple times. Can't block it. Boom, right up the middle, unblocked. Ellinger had no chance. No chance. I feel for Sam Ellinger here because he had 2 games. One of them, he nearly got a win against the Commanders there at home. On limited prep time as the starter, and then he's just thrown to the wolves out there in New England with a team that under Belichick has always feasted on rookie, quote unquote rookie quarterbacks,
correct.
which he's basically a rookie quarterback at that point. So anyway, that's another thing to
Hopefully Tony Sperano Jr. is good at coaching up how to
man.
block stunts because
seriously.
the most basic of concepts was just it's like they'd never seen him before last year.
What was also a major issue last year was it wasn't just the pass blocking, it was the run blocking as well. Much different than 2021 where, again, I've said this stat before, and even in 2021, the pass blocking, according to Pro Football Focus, was ranked 30th in the NFL for the Colts offensive line. It's been bad for a couple years, but at least then you had one of the best run blocking offensive lines in the league, and you could somewhat make up for it in that side of the ball. Couldn't do it at all last year. Their rushing average fell from nearly 150 yards a game and 5 yards per carry to 110 yards per game.
40
and
yards a game you lose.
4.3 yards per carry.
That's crazy.
Yes, it's ridiculous. With many of the same guys that you were expecting to still
And
lead them.
Taylor was banged up.
Yes,
he
you
was
have
with
to-
the toe and the ankle, but still.
Have to include that.
But still, it wasn't that they went from a franchise record tying 5.1 yards a carry
Yep.
to 4.3, I
4.3.
think.
Yep.
So it impacted everything they did.
Mm-hmm.
You wanted Matt Ryan. You thought Matt Ryan was a great fit because we're going to give him some pass protection and boy that run game, and neither one worked.
Yeah, it was that run game. It was more like it. The emphasis.
They made Jonathan Taylor look like just a guy.
Yep. Very
He's-
much
and
so.
he's
most
not
of the
just a
season.
guy.
Nope. When his long run of the season was what, like 28 yards, something like that.
I think he busted one
he
against
He
the
busted
Raiders.
one against
One.
right,
There you
Yeah.
go.
but still, I mean,
When you only bust one,
right.
that is not a recipe for success. So your projected starting 5 for the Colts offensive line will be from left to right: Bernhard Raimann, Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly. Right now, Will Fries penciled in there at right guard, and then
Use a pencil.
yes, I will very much use a pencil. Make sure the eraser is good and ready to go. It's not like one of those erasers that's ground down to the tip. It's like half silver already. No. This is fresh and pink.
Tear your paper when you do it.
Yeah, exactly. Gosh. I need another one. I need another like bubble test, standardized test. No. But you look at the depth after that, and we've touched on this today already, that behind the starting 5, you have Danny Pinter, Carter O'Donnell, Wesley French, Arlington Hambright,
Who?
Dakota Shepley,
Who?
and Jordan Murray. Exactly.
Say it again.
Who?
Murray's at least been around for a couple years on their practice squad, so I recognize that.
So he should be kind of good right now. You would
is
hope if he's been on the practice squad. for a
Carter
few-
O'Donnell's been on the practice squad for 3 years.
Yep, you're right. Both of those guys. Jordan Murray, Carter O'Donnell.
It's again, if they played this weekend, you think, holy crap, what are they going to do? They don't. There is time. And I don't think Ballard will ever change from offensive line, defensive line, being foundational pieces.
Yep.
So if we're sitting here in the mandatory minicamp in June, and this thing hasn't changed other than maybe a second or third round draft pick, then there are issues. Have to just let it play out.
Yeah. You need help right now. You need depth, whether it's veterans or rookies or both. Both would be great,
Both.
I think. Right now, you don't have anyone who's played a single snap, I don't think, in the
You've
NFL.
got 6 guys. Right now, you've got 6 guys.
At tackle. Yeah. You have
tackle.
there's no one who's played a tackle snap there with depth in the NFL. It's just guys who've been on the practice squad from at least I don't think there is. So like like you said, they're playing a game tomorrow. But holy heck, they need to change some things before they do play a game.
Need new windows? Let the Hometown team help. Hometown Windows and Doors is Central Indiana's premier locally owned full-service Anderson dealer with master installers. From design to installation, we handle it all, carrying nationally known brands like Anderson with more options and competitive pricing. Call us direct and get 25% off your windows if you buy within the next 60 days.
Please contact your Hometown team today. We are Central Indiana's premier locally owned full-service Anderson dealer.
National brand, hometown feel.
The story of Hancock Health is all about you and everything you need to live your healthiest life. Like Hancock Regional, one of the nation's safest hospitals, and an independent health network with over 70 doctors at more than 30 locations around East Central Indiana. We're growing and evolving to help further your story. And we're just getting started. See all the ways Hancock Health and you can work together to make health possible at hancockhealth.org.
So let's look at the draft, since that is the first major milestone in front of us in terms of changing teams' rosters across the league. There are a couple of really good tackles, as there are every year coming out of college. The most the most popular one that I've seen in mock drafts is the young man out of Northwestern, Peter Skoronski.
Sounds like a lineman, doesn't he? Or a
does,
fullback?
Very much so. And definitely a fullback from like the early 90s. Him and Moose Johnston would be just plowing over people. Tom Rathman from the 80s, of course, too. But you got him, Paris Johnson out of Ohio State, Broderick Jones out of Georgia. Those are kind of your top 3 widely anticipated guys to go in the top 15, top 20 perhaps, or the first round in general, Joe.
I'd be shocked if any of those 3 fell out of the first round.
Right, and that's what happens. We've talked about this before, guys, when we've suspected the Colts might be after a first round offensive tackle, where they took Kwity Paye instead of Christian Darrisaw, much to leaving Colts quarterbacks up at night. As much as I love Kwity, don't get me wrong. But anyway, we've talked about this before, is that when guys have the traits and the tape at left tackle, especially, Chap, they do not fall very far. They do not fall past the first round. Guys who are in the second round and beyond have a couple of tweaks that they need, but the guys that are the elite of the elite at left tackle, there's always a market for them, and I think there's no better way to figure that out than by watching videotape of the Colts offense for the past 2 years.
Quarterback, edge rusher, left tackle. However you want to mix it up, those are the 3 positions. And the really good, dominant, elite left tackles are early picks. They just are. You may, go back to – it's funny how the further away you get, the more you appreciate Anthony Costanzo. Was he 20, 22, 25?
Yeah,
pick?
he was in the 20s.
And that's where like Tariq Glenn was. I think Tariq Glenn was 19, I think it was. Mm-hmm. Generally, these guys go top 10 unless the quarterbacks push them back. So if you can get the guy, if you don't need a quarterback and you get a chance to get, that guy at left tackle, you get him and he's your guy for 10 years. Minimum.
Right. And that's an interesting thing. If the quarterback's not there, Joe, this has got to be one of the positions that the Colts would consider, having a Peter Skoronski for Northwestern, if the quarterback they like is not there, because like Chap
if they've got
said,
a plan B.
Right. If there's a plan B, he could be the plan B there at number 4.
Yeah, and it'd be, I think, just of how this draft is seen, maybe a slight reach, but at a position as important as left tackle, that's a position that you can reach for. Like all of these guys are considered very good prospects, but not like that elite left tackle where you're just like, I don't know how he fails type of guy. Skoronski's missing the length. He's got his arms are a little bit on the shorter side, so there is talk of him moving inside in the NFL, kind of like Zach Martin did from Notre Dame. My favorite's Paris Johnson because he just has all the traits. He's got the length, he's got the athleticism to move and mirror. He's huge, and he played at a high program in Ohio State. And then Broderick Jones is just a maul or a bully out there at left tackle for Georgia. So any of these guys would probably be an upgrade over Ryman, and you could move him over to guard.
Exactly.
Because Ryman doesn't have great length either. So
you'd feel pretty good about the line if they did that, wouldn't you?
I would.
Get your left tackle at 4 and swing Ryman to right guard.
I would not be mad at all about Paris Johnson at 4, Ryman at right guard, and then find a way to get back up and take Hendon Hooker. And then all of a sudden things, starting to look up for the offense. But those are the 3 guys who, if the Colts take a quarterback or they don't go tackle in round 1, they're probably not going to be sitting there when they come around in round 2.
There are some guys who could be there around 35. And there's a mix of guards and tackles here. A lot of them are big guys. Obviously, they're all big guys, for crying out loud. They play offensive line, but none of them are as big as my guy, DeJuan Jones, the former Ben Davis Giant. We have great video of him dunking there on the west side in gyms all across
6'8".
Central Indiana. Yes, big dude DeJuan, 6'8", 374, 36 3/8 inch arms. Joe is just salivating over those arms.
Do you love that arm length?
Yes, that's
I
right.
love arm length.
As do we all. But just
you played right tackle at Ohio State, and what you can do with the position flexibility is you can move Braden Smith into his original position, guard, if you really want to, and have the pair of the league's highest paid guards
And tallest.
but then probably some of the cheapest tackles with Ryman and DeJuan Jones on rookie contracts. So he'd probably be an option there with their second round pick. I doubt he gets out of the second round, and he just engulfs defenders. He can be beat sometimes by some of the quicker moves that defensive ends can lay on him because he's just so big. Like, he moves well for his size, but it's still below average foot quickness because he's just a behemoth. But
Too big to play guard.
probably too big
probably
to play
so.
guard. Yeah.
There has to be a limit there somewhere. 6'8" is probably that limit. Yeah.
374 now, so much 6'8".
Yeah, probably the limit. There's other guys here like Osiris Torrance out of Florida, Darnell Wright from Tennessee, Anson Harrison, Oklahoma, John Michael Schmitz from Minnesota. All guys that could go late in the first round or early in the second round. It also brings up just the idea, Chap, of where the Colts see Ryan Kelly in the future. And Chris Ballard said at the owners' meetings, he was asked directly about about Ryan Kelly and about Kenny Moore, and he said that they had some offers for those guys, but they're really good players. They didn't want to let them go. So clearly that's just saying that Ballard didn't get a meaningful enough offer for either of them. If
you wonder what that means.
Exactly.
5th round, 6th round,
that's what I was going to propose. I was going to say, like, if they would have gotten a 4th round for Ryan Kelly, would that have been it?
When they get a 5 for Gilmore?
You got a 5 for Stephon Gilmore.
And that's a little different, I think. I think he wanted...
Yeah, he wanted to go, you think. And he was also promised something here in Indianapolis that they did not deliver. He was promised to kind of be a missing piece to challenge for the division, and that was not the case. And we talked about that, I think, a little bit last week, too, about promises that were not delivered to certain free agents and why that's reason for them the Colts to let him go for only a quote-unquote a 5th-round pick. But do they take a center? Do they take a John Michael Schmitz out of Minnesota, or one a little bit later? If we go deep down into our day 2 prospects, guys like Joe Tittman out of Wisconsin, Luke Whippler out of Ohio State, all these Big Ten centers here. That's where you go to be a center in the NFL is the Big Ten. But
Syracuse.
That's right. We have a Syracuse guy, Matthew Bergeron.
You put that on there just for him, didn't you?
Well, you got to keep Dave excited about it somehow.
He's good. This is a good player. He was a left tackle by his senior year. He's big. He's 6'5", 318 pounds. Great run blocker. Really does need a little bit of help in the passing game, though. So if you want to keep mauling people with the run, great. But I think in the NFL today, you're going to need some better pass blockers, too.
in a lot of these tackles, and this is what tends to happen once you get into the second, third, fourth, fifth rounds with these tackles, is there starts to be talk of them moving to guard in the NFL, which works for the Colts because they need a guard. And so you get somebody who could start at guard and then also offer position flexibility should Braden Smith go down. And then you can bump them back out to right tackle if you feel better about that than your other backup options at right tackle. With center, I mean, they could draft a center, and we've seen the Eagles do this for some years as a await Kelsey's retirement.
Jason Kelsey, still playing.
But a couple years ago they drafted Landon Dickerson out of Alabama, who played center, and they're just starting him at guard. I think last year they started as center Juergens.
Yep.
Or they
Cam
drafted
Juergens.
as center Juergens, and I don't think he started last year, but he's waiting in the wings. So the Colts could always draft a center, have him play right guard for a year or two until Kelly finishes up his contract, and then move him over to center when Kelly moves on. So I think that's a very possible move. And, just looking at all these names here, if Darnell Wright from Tennessee, who's a powerful right tackle, gets to them, they can move him inside to guard, and he could excel there as well and still keep that position flexibility. So that they have a lot of options in terms of what they want to do and in a very good and deep offensive line draft.
Yeah, offensive line is an interesting position here, Chap. I think back to what the Colts did with Braden Smith. They drafted him out of Auburn. At the time, they were thinking he was a guard, or Chris Ballard was thinking he was a guard. Then he got out there on the practice field. He got with Coach Gouge, Dave DeGuglielmo, and he was like, "No, man, this guy's tackle. Let's leave him out there at right tackle."
Now, of course, again, I keep going back to the fact that they had no one else.
Exactly.
I mean, it was one of those, well, who else? I guess Braden could slide out there. But it turned out to be, a blessing because he started there and he's never stepped away. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of almost the opposite of what Joe says. You normally draft tackles that go to guards, and this guy's kind of gone the other way. So it's worked out very well. I'm curious how they prioritize their offensive line needs in the draft. Do they see tackle? Let's say four is going to be a quarterback. So do you look at with that second and third pick being corner, tackle, corner? You don't take a guard that high, do you? Or even a center that high?
For how bad the offensive line was last year, I wouldn't mind it.
Okay.
Maybe it's Steve Avila out of TCU, great athlete, good in pass pro, 3-year starter, team captain. I've heard nothing but good things about him. Dave, you mentioned Osiris Torrance. He's a guy who very well could go in the first round, but if he slides to the second, he's just a mauler. Good balance, 0 penalties last year.
I like that.
Technician, very high Pro Football Focus grade last year, so move him over to guard. And because I think we've mentioned it a few times, but Ryman was the first time the Colts used a draft pick in the first 3 rounds on an offensive lineman since 2018. Mm-hmm. I mean, we talk about them investing a lot in the offensive line. They have financially, but they've not been
on second contracts.
On second contracts, yeah. They've been giving out big contracts, but they've not invested high draft capital in offensive line very much as of recent. So I wouldn't mind using that second round pick to try and make sure your quarterback of the future has a little extra time to find the open guy out there.
That's what I was thinking is if you've got a corner and a tackle guard center type guy rated similarly at the top of the second round, you go offensive line. The tiebreaker is your rookie quarterback.
Yeah.
You've got to, if you're going to invest your career in the franchise's immediate 6 to 8 year future in a quarterback, then doggone it, do whatever it takes to give him a chance. And that starts with the offensive line.
You don't just say, we're going to draft Anthony Richardson. He's a mobile guy, so let him run. Let him use those legs.
He can avoid the pressure.
Yeah, no, that's no one says that. So, you want to protect him. You want to let him develop. You want
to let him run when he wants to run,
exactly,
not when he has to run.
When he needs to run. Yeah, not all the dadgum time. So
it's really going to be curious when you get with how they do this, how they look at their roster, where the needs are. If you take the 4th pick and the quarterback out, do they see the biggest need at offensive line, which maybe you do. Corner is right now a mess because your starters are Isaiah Rodgers and
Dallas Flowers
Kenny Moore.
and Kenny Moore.
We talked corner last week. Starting outside cornerbacks are currently an undrafted guy and a seventh round pick was Rodgers.
He was either 6th or 7th, and I think he was 7th. I
Yeah.
can't remember for sure.
So that's just not a good formula for success, banking on, finding two diamonds in the rough there. But for a team that's picking 4th for a reason and probably isn't going to be competing for a playoff spot next year, I would sacrifice the bad defense to make sure that my quarterback has some protection.
I totally agree.
And maybe a guy who could help protect him is Cody Mauch out of North Dakota State. If you've ever seen this guy, he looks like a hockey player. He's missing his 2 front teeth. He's got long red hair that just hangs out of his helmet. 6'5", 302, and that's up 80 pounds from when he joined school there in North Dakota as a tight end. 221 pounds, made the move to offensive line, kind of similar to Ryman. Really just gained a lot of weight and moved to the position. Nasty demeanor, good run blocker, 3-year starter. Pass pro needs a little work, very athletic guy, but probably a move inside to guard is where he's going to end up in the NFL. So maybe the Colts look at him in the 2nd or 3rd round, and he becomes their right guard of the future.
There you go. And here's something that I want to bring something up that you were kind of touching on for a bit, Joe, is that the guys that have that flexibility right now, guard or tackle, whatever, you bring them in and like they can have that flexibility in the NFL. And I agree with you. I think that they can. At the same time, I don't want to put too much on their plate early. You know what I'm saying here? Like I would rather have a swing guy be a veteran who's been in the league a couple years. And that's why, and that's why, kind of to piggyback on another point that we've made, like the Colts have not invested really high picks in the first round in the offensive line in recent years. They've invested money on second contracts, but not picks. That's why you don't have anybody there right now. Like you don't have that guy who's on his 3rd year of a 4-year deal, who was a 3rd round offensive line pick a couple years ago, who's played a little bit here and there, and is kind of just waiting in the wings. Like that's really what. In a way, that's what Danny Pinter was entering last year. Like, he'd played some center. He'd played, I think, on the inside a little bit, mainly at center. And you're like, okay, let's see what he can do. And it turns out he didn't do so well at right guard, unfortunately, for Danny. But that's what this team is lacking right now, is a guy who's a couple years in, on the outside specifically is what I'm talking about here. Like I'd tackle who's played a little bit in relief, who's come in and had some snaps, who has some tape, who has some film, maybe has a start or two if somebody was injured. And you're like, okay, I kind of feel all right if he has to. Like I don't feel great, but I feel all right if he's playing. Like that guy they don't have right now. So like I think you need to draft somebody who's going to be like that in 3 years or so. A guy who's big enough to be on the outside that can come in and fill in for either can fill in for your left tackle in Ryman or your right tackle in Braden. And like you're not going to feel great about it originally, but in 3 years down the road, you'll feel a lot better at it, because that's what the Colts offensive line does not have right now. It's a swing tackle, a backup guy who can go from side to side. Hopefully, you can find someone in free agency who can be that right now. But in 3 years, like you have a guy that's at least that, if not a starter at guard or something like that down the road. So
yeah, and I wouldn't mind the state of the offensive line investing a 3rd or 4th round pick to do that, even if it is just a swing tackle.
Aren't they going to draft 2 linemen? Don't you think they have to draft 2 linemen?
Yeah.
And I'm not talking 7th round.
Yeah, like they've been doing, where they just throw a 7th round pick at a lineman at the end of the draft, and then they get cut by August.
We'll see if Jackson Barton works. Yeah. We'll see if Javon Patterson works.
This roster and the line cries out for 2 early or mid-round offensive lineman. Just does.
Yeah, and a couple that kind of catch your eye are Blake Freeland from BYU and Jalen Duncan from Maryland, both great athletes, which is why their names come up in the draft, but need a little bit of refinement, especially in pass protection, to really reach their potential, which is why they might be available in the 3rd or 4th round. Freeland, 6'8", 300 pounds. He's a guy where leverage is always probably going to be an issue with him, with the defensive ends bending under him to get to the quarterback. Duncan's a great athlete as well, a little bit inconsistent, 4-year starter. Both of these guys 4-year starters, so they do have experience, might be able to give you some swing tackle ability right away and develop into a more consistent player who can start for you down the line. So those are some guys maybe 3rd or 4th round that the Colts take a swing on.
There's only so much we can say when you get to mid-round prospects at offensive line in the NFL draft.
Yeah, I'm not going deeper than that.
Exactly. I was going to say like there's only so much we could say, but at the same time, there's no you cannot overstate the importance of it. You cannot overstate the importance of getting the offensive line right, because as we saw the last 2 years pass blocking, especially the last year with everything going wrong, if the offensive line is in shambles, then nothing else works.
Nothing works.
Nothing works. It doesn't matter if you have Jonathan Taylor healthy back there. It's not going to work.
Maybe Matt Ryan works last year if he's given time.
I think he's at least maybe average level quarterback play, maybe.
Average would have been contending for the AFC South last year. I mean, Jacksonville made the playoffs and won a game there, but you forget they had to win a bunch in a row down the stretch to do it. So the Colts could have been in contention very easily with even average quarterback play last year, which the offensive line did not let happen.
Absolutely not.
You mentioned a thing that I kind of mentioned many times is the one thing that doomed this team last year is they kept putting people in positions to fail. And that's what you don't do. You play to a player and a position's strength, and they didn't do that. They put everybody in position to fail. Too many people in position to fail, and they failed.
And I think a big part of this is, they could draft a stud guard prospect like Osiris Torres in the second round, but that's not going to have the impact that it needs to if Quentin, Kelly, and Braden don't, get their act together.
If they don't play at their level,
it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
And it sinks the team because you've invested so much in them financially, especially Braden and Quentin, because you can't get out of their contracts. Kelly, they could get out this year with minimal damage if they want to,
and they would still gain $7 or $8 million of cap space if you wanted to do that.
And next year the numbers get even better for the Colts if they want to cut them then. So I think maybe drafting a center prospect makes a lot of sense. Get someone cheaper and hopefully better, because Kelly really hasn't played at that Pro Bowl level for a few years now. But if you're paying Quentin Nelson, what'd you say it was $25 million in 2024, and he's just average out there guard, that just hurts your team. There's no way it doesn't.
Well, one thing that you mentioned, and it's really true, I think, with Kelly, is the way they don't have the developmental players and somebody that when this guy is gone, this guy steps in.
Right.
If they had that center interior guy who they really believed in, maybe they let Ryan Kelly go, and they take whatever they were offered. But they to have traded or cut him, all that we've said about the offensive line, take him out of this discussion, and all you've done is create another problem that you have to deal with. So they really have to be banking on the new O-line coach and assistant, their impact, plus these players getting their act together. A lot of this will be on them. You can coach all you want, but these guys have got to play better. I'm sure they all know it. But had they had a plan B in place at center, there's probably a decent chance that Ryan Kelly would be gone.
And I think maybe if they didn't see Pinter disappoint like he did last year, maybe because that was their plan B.
I think so.
And I think a lot of people
he played very well. He was 3-0 as a starter 2 years ago, and Ryan Kelly was out with COVID and personal.
He played well.
Yep.
And I don't know if it's just a center thing. I don't know if it was a coaching thing, because the whole offensive line played poorly last year. And so maybe getting some fresh voices will energize the group and kind of bring things back together. Because what was it, Strasser?
Chris Strasser. Where's he at? Houston now?
I think so. Yeah.
So hopefully
they
he has a similar
kept
impact
losing
on their
coaches,
O-line.
and he kept being there.
Yep.
I mean, and
like Brady was gone, Reich was gone, and there's Strasser keeping on walking into the building, collecting a paycheck every day.
It was strange.
Had some dirt on Ballard.
The entire room was broken, and they have to believe that a new set of eyes and maybe more motivation internally gets these guys to play better. They have to play better.
You say broken, and I think the one image that shows the utter brokenness of last year's offensive line was against the Giants in New York.
Nick Foles.
When Nick Foles is writhing in pain on the ground, and Kayvon Thibodeau's doing snow angels right next to him.
And what did the line do?
Absolutely jack
Nothing.
squat.
Nothing.
Jack squat. Your offensive line just watching that
Somebody
happen.
should have got their ass thrown out of the game.
Yeah, should have gotten fined.
Yep.
Would you have to
Jim
lose?
Irsay would have paid that fine.
You're right. That was the snapshot of this line is your quarterback. Let's say they hated Nick Foles. They just hated him
For some reason.
and they didn't.
Right.
But you just come to the aid of your teammate, and they didn't.
Well, doesn't that seem completely opposite of what we thought Quentin Nelson was?
Yes.
The enforcer, the ass kicker out there, and then
Yes.
he's just staring at it.
Yes.
I think it just goes to show how completely soulless this team was towards the end
Anybody,
of the year.
a tight end, a running back, a wide receiver, somebody should have did something, and they did nothing.
I'd like to think that Michael Pittman Jr. would have done something if he was close, but he was down the field, running a route or something.
Pitt probably would have.
He might have body slammed someone or tried to, but he might have been the only one. That's
You're
the problem.
right. That if that didn't tell you where this team was and the offensive line was, nothing will.
And next year needs to change. It needs to be.
I'm not saying
needs
get
to be an
nasty.
attitude
I'm
adjustment.
not saying that, but doggone it, have your teammates back, have your quarterbacks back when he's writhing in pain, and the guy that put him there is doing snow angels.
And I think Joe, you were right that they were just beat mentally at that point of the season.
Agreed.
They're like,
They didn't want to be there.
Exactly, and that was part of it. And so I understand it as a human being. I understand what they were thinking in that moment or what they were not thinking at that
I
moment.
didn't want to watch the games. I
Yeah,
doubt they wanted to
we have
play
to do
them.
this stupid podcast every week. Jeez.
Colts lost again, 7th in a row,
We do
Mike.
appreciate you sticking with us, throughout last season and then
And Nick
throughout this
Foles' season
offseason.
is over.
Well, yeah. Now there's actually interesting things to talk about, like who the Colts are going to take in the 3rd and 4th
Nick
round.
Foles is still on the
offensive line.
roster.
He is on the roster. How about that, Nick Foles? And a good quarterback battle, Nick Foles and Gardner Minshew for that starting spot next year.
Sam Ellinger.
Yeah,
Can't forget him.
I get it's a long
Sling
off
Sam.
season, but I'm still just kind of scratching my head about what the plan is.
What are we
and
doing?
What are the justifications for some of these moves?
What's going on?
I guess we'll see.
In
Chris
time.
Ballard's gonna Chris Ballard.
In time, we will find out. And you can follow us on Twitter at Colts Blue Zone for news and notes throughout the week. Follow moves as they happen. And we've been retweeting some nice game tape video of some wide receivers, some over the past day that I've seen out there. Some
You get your
intriguing
quarterback this
prospects.
year, and you get Marvin Jr. next year.
Hey, dude, Marvin Jr., bring him. Let's go. Let's go.
Would he be the top receiver in the draft? He would, wouldn't he?
He would this year. So he's
Top 10?
Yeah, I think so.
He's bigger than his dad. His dad wasn't very big.
No, I mean
Doesn't matter how big he was. You know why? He went to Syracuse University. And with that, we appreciate you listening to the Colts Blue Zone podcast, making us a part of your day. Be sure to download, subscribe, get us delivered to your inbox as soon as it drops. We will see you next week as the draft inches ever closer. Thanks for listening to the Colts Blue Zone podcast.